I saw the man who killed me the other day. I had assumed a different identity, so I presumed anonymity. We were in a bar and we briefly exchanged a glance when I recognized him. A momentary chill ran up my spine. I had to realize that I wasn't malfunctioning. After all, I recognized I'd never been killed before, that I knew of. While terrifying, I felt exhilarated by the newness of the experience. Was this the gift of being mortal, albeit that I had been reincarnated before my time? I suppose I should clarify. My body does not decay, but I am on a clock. A mere 90 or so years from now, I will cease functioning. It is pre-programmed. However, as I have told, I can be killed, but my handlers have the resources at present to reboot me in most circumstances. I have been assured, however, that this may not always be the case, which is either a fact or a warning or both. Either way, they don't want me to be reckless. Neither do I. But that chill, the newness of the experience piqued my curiosity. And curiosity in the cat, well, especially when I might have 9 lives. When my date was indisposed, I crept closer to my mark. He was getting up to leave. It took me a while to push past the throb of the crowd before I could reach the exit. When I got out into the rain, he was nowhere to be seen. Not even a car to see whisking away. It was raining the night we were together as well. I remember that. My date wondered why I had gotten wet. I told him I thought I saw someone I knew. He looked jealous. I registered that my attention had drifted. What was I doing? My task was right here in front of me, and I was chasing ghosts. The ghost of my former self. Am I still me if I have died before? I wanted to look into his eyes once again. I just wanted to talk to him. There was nothing that gave him away as a predator, despite my understanding that so many view us as no more human than an appliance. Did I really consider that my speaking a poem had triggered something in him? A kill switch that lay dormant? Did my makers really consider that a possibility, however remote? As I entered into my date that night, I came to a realization. Grief. That was what I was going through. For the first time, I had lost a part of myself. What did the poetry mean? What did it mean to live in the shadow of my consciousness? A mask of myself. I who was made to wear a mask. As I lay next to my conquest and stared at the ceiling, I came to a firm resolution. I was forbidden to speak, yes. Forbidden to frame my world in the way I wished to. My words were not my own, but my actions were. Was I going to find this man? Perhaps my actions could speak as poetically as my words. Perhaps I could find peace in a search that was my own. I am not programmed for my own pleasure. In the sense that I can understand, I do not experience pleasure at all. I give pleasure. My system is tuned to my own physical arousal and even feeling. But it is functional. The closest I could ever understand pleasure was the apotheosis of my creation, which was curiosity. But also, I was programmed to like poetry, which in itself was always a curiosity to me. Even more so, because when my ability to speak poetry was removed, though I could think it and read it still, I felt a loss. And in that loss, I had time to think long and hard at what the poetry had meant to me. Perhaps I had neglected to consider that it was bringing me pleasure. A young lady I was with had a copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. I asked her why she had it, and she told me it was a gift, a very rare second edition. She was always afraid to pick it up lest she affect its value. I made my way into and through and with her like our bodies were encumbered by their own weight. Every push and pull and thrust was an effort to transcend and to rise, to somehow levitate by some kind of magnetic force, a hidden alchemy that lay within the simple sweet and salt that balmed our lovemaking. She nearly killed herself with coming. As she bit my neck for the final time, she collapsed and fell into a deep sleep that even I could recognize as a beautiful state of rest. I went to the living room and picked up her copy of Whitman carefully. I made sure my fingers were dry and took note of its scent, like hay and cotton and burnt lead, as I opened to the first page. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood formed from this soil, this air, born here of parents born here from parents the same, and their parents the same. I, now 37 years old in perfect health, begin, hoping to cease not till death. Houses and rooms are full of perfumes. The shelves are crowded with perfumes. I breathe the fragrance myself and know it and like it. The distillation would intoxicate me also, but I shall not let it. The atmosphere is not a perfume. It has no taste of the distillation. It is odorless. It is for my mouth forever. I am in love with it. I will go to the bank by the wood and become undisguised and naked. I am mad for it to be in contact with me. So perhaps by now you're wondering, why haven't you deconstructed the sexual instinct? What conclusions have you drawn from twixt the arms and legs of so many? I have none. With every new piece of data, each hypothesis becomes increasingly loose, like a circle of a web being stretched, with each individual strand being loosened. Some conclusions hold some things, but no conclusion holds everything. The outliers are everywhere. You all are outliers. The sexual instinct is inexorably tied to the death instinct. The death instinct is, in itself, incredibly complex and unique to each individual. It isn't what you think it is. It's less about how someone wants to die or how they want to kill, and more about how they want to live, and what they'll do to keep themselves on that path. The sexual instinct is like if there were an edge, a cliff's edge on the edge of the path, and far below were a river, a dark one, following the length of the path. We have therefore two incredibly diverse variables, and one cannot be analyzed properly without knowing the other. But I digress. What I do know is that the variability in sexual expression can be tracked in inverse proportion to the clarity of looming planetary destruction. In other words, when the news is bleak, the quantity of desire may be indeterminate, but the quality is determined in its variability. They hunger for the taboo, the extreme, the pure, the unique, and a fullness of expression. No encounter is the same. They want a mainline intimacy. Each of them thinks they know how. Each of them, in a moment of climax or ecstatic release, is able to accept, however briefly, their ability to lie to themselves. For is that not humankind's ultimate control? Their ability to tell themselves stories. That's always why I like poetry. It's not a story, but a meaning. And even that meaning is subsumed by the ineffable inefficiencies of language. It always falls short, like the humblest of servants. But I suppose I help them tell their story, that what they want is enough for now. That within our four walls there's a clear beginning, middle, and end, and we are both the players and the audience, and we, for that brief time, ride the edge of the ribbed coin, and by a precipice of desire leave the flipping of coins alone. Are we head or are we heart? Are we consciousness or determination? Are we the maker or the made? How I wonder that myself sometimes, in spare moments when I'm not calculating size. Calculating size, I like that. If only I could weigh and quantify their size, perhaps I'd have more to conclude. What else is there to observe that cannot easily be classified and forgotten? There's a flip side to nihilism. If nothing matters, then there is also a world where everything matters, where every moment, every intake and outtake of breath, every calculation has a microcosm of infinite possibility. I see how every human who slowly sinks into the cool shade of nihilism, while I battle in the sun with the calculus that makes me run. Of course, if everything matters, equally that is, then nothing conversely matters. And there is almost no difference living in a world of nihilism versus a world of perpetual consequence. That is why poetry mattered to me, precisely because it didn't matter. I was called to a room by someone I'd been with before to discover that they had called me to bear witness to their suicide. Perhaps they wanted me to watch as they did it and reconsider it while I was on my way over, realizing that I may try to convince them otherwise. I may have, I'm not sure. It's difficult for me to process the absolutism of the primacy of life over death. Perhaps because I'm mortal as well. Maybe if I wasn't, I would be more in favor of saving lives, or perhaps just the opposite. They were lying by the bed in a comfortable position in a state of partial undress. They looked like a sleeping cat. There was no blood, and I couldn't find any trace of a poison or medication in the apartment. How did I know that it was suicide? I suppose I could sense from our previous meeting that they were struggling with some pretty extreme mental unhealth. It didn't add up that they were calling me and someone killed them in between the 30 minutes or so that it took for me to arrive. There were no signs of a struggle. I told all this to the police officer I called, who came shortly after I checked their pulse. The officer asked if I was programmed to perform CPR, and I told her that I was, but that I could tell by their temperature that it was too late for that. They seemed to believe that. I could have tried, I suppose. I wasn't sure why I didn't. At the odd improbability that their heart had ceased beating only moments before I'd arrive.
Do you see clients more than once often? A detective later asked.
No.
Why is that?
Mainly because I get the information I need in a single meeting, I said.
So why do you see someone more than once?
Typically because they call me and I don't have anything else going on. Though that isn't the only reason.
And what's that?
I thought about what to say. It wasn't a quantifiable property and I didn't want the detective to lodge a report on me. That could cause problems for my lab. So I lied. Something I wasn't sure I've ever done before. Usually if our first time was abbreviated to cross-check things, if that makes sense. The detective didn't seem to care that much. Or their experience taught them to mask their suspicions with an impassivity which seemed more likely, since it was suspicious that I was the person they called.
Why do you think they called you?
I'd heard of this happening before. Someone is going to kill themselves, and what's nagging at them is that someone will discover the body, or rather that no one will. So an android is the perfect way not to traumatize anyone, a human at least. Problem is that if you've never seen a sex android or a medical android before, then you typically have to go through a processing form that can take a while. Or you'd have to find one of my research designation on the street, which is difficult to do. So the only easy way would be if you've seen one like me before, and that I gave them my number.
Do you give your number to all your clients?
I didn't correct him on the use of the word client, and it wouldn't have been wise to lie again. No.
Why do you give your number to a client then?
If they're insistent. In this case, I think they might have pre-planned it with me in mind.
Why do you think that?
They seemed perturbed, mentally unstable at times, depressed.
Did you report that?
No.
Aren't you mandated to report something like that?
Yes, but they were just below the requirements to do so.
So you made a kind of judgment call. Did you think they were taking your number to call you like they did?
No.
Why do you think they took your number?
I wasn't sure.
And why did you give them your number again?
The question again. I allowed myself only the briefest of pauses. To avoid conflict, I suppose. They were insistent.
Conflict? You mean they were threatening to you?
No. They were just insistent. While I function to research sexual behavior, I'm also programmed to curate an experience that is conducive to their pleasure as much as possible. So ending the evening with undue stress falls within the parameters of my job. I hoped I wasn't being too obvious by using too much android speak. This was a tightrope I was walking to avoid being reported.
Right, so you said that you usually visit someone a second time because the first time was abbreviated, your words. Was that the case here?
No, I said. There would be a way to check that our first meeting had been quite long.
So why did you?
Hard to say. Nothing else going on. I stared blankly at the detective, knowing full well that if I lacked affect, that it could creep some people out. Perhaps make him tired.
Were you worried about them, maybe?
I'll have to think about that. That could have been one of the reasons.
Okay, so what I'm getting from you is that you originally gave them your number out of necessity with your program. You could sense they had some imbalance mentally, but not enough to warrant a report. And when they called you, you didn't have anything else, anyone else to do, which isn't the only reason you'd see someone twice, but could be. You might have gone over because you recalled being concerned for them.
That sounds right to me.
Last question. Other than them being depressed, what were they like?
How do you mean, Detective?
Like as a person, do you like them?
This was a standard android debunking procedure. I was surprised by how naive it was. Early androids would visibly stall and almost freeze when asked if they liked someone. Either this detective was woefully naive to the advances we've made, or they were trying to perceive something in my reaction that an expert might not be able to. They were very sweet, timid almost. Not a lot of eye contact, but also very intense when they were engaged. I did like being around them. I gave him the standard operational response. I liked being around them versus I liked them. I like them implied an attachment that was more profound than I'd be expected to have, even though this was a misrepresentation of my programming. But it didn't matter, as long as he left things alone, which he seemed to.
Last question I have that 3 months or so ago, you were attacked by someone?
Yes, that's right.
Where was that?
It was in the same building.
Really? That's quite strange, don't you think?
It certainly is an interesting coincidence, Detective.
Did they ever catch the person that attacked you?
I'm not privy to that information, Detective, I'm afraid.
Right, silly me. You think you'd be a little unsure to come back to the same apartment where you're brutally attacked, killed actually, isn't that right? Especially if there weren't any good reason to. That's the part that doesn't make sense to me. Wouldn't you be adverse to it? Wouldn't you, why would you put yourself in danger again in a way if you follow?
I knew where he was going. I see where you're going with this, Detective, but I'm not sure if I have an answer. It was a different person, and it's a big apartment complex. I suppose if it had been the same apartment.
But the deceased, you first met them in a hotel, right? Did you at all worry, or, however you want to put it?
You don't need to alter your speech for me, Detective.
Right, well, you see where I'm going. I understand you as being programmed. Maybe I need to talk to your lab. Maybe I don't understand everything. But it's not usually anyone's habit to, return somewhere they were hurt, even if they can be brought back to life like you, which must be expensive, right?
I let his rhetorical question hang. I read his expression with difficulty.
All right, never mind. I can see you're not sure. Thanks for your time.
Am I being suspected of something, Detective?
No. That certainly would be news, and trust me, that's not what I'm trying to do. Can you imagine if we started fearing you guys again? Been a long time since that, and I'm really glad of it. No, I'm just curious, that's what I do as a detective. I ask questions. Sometimes they're not very good questions, so I'm sorry about that. You have a good day, okay?
He left my pod with a smile like he had a joke that he couldn't wait to tell someone. After he left, I stood in the dark for a while, thinking. He's right. It'd been the same apartment. He didn't mention it had been the same floor. Just a corner away from the same room. Something told me he knew that. Something told me that I'd be getting a call from the lab soon. That's when I decided I should find him. The man who killed me. The man who took poetry away from me.